with Chiefs OTAs getting underway this week, we look back and reflect on the offseason that it has been, give out some grades, and let's talk about some of the remaining questions we hope get answered the rest of this offseason.
Hey, what's good, y'all? It's your boy JD6 here. I'm with my man. Shout out to KC Sports Authority. Make sure y'all go check that podcast out, man.
You heard the man.
What's up, guys? Welcome into another episode of the KC Sports Authority podcast. Christopher Tenpenny, Keegan Russell with you here tonight. Talk a little bit of Chiefs offseason. It's been a wild last 6-7 weeks since we've talked last. I know last time we talked, we had Jay Binkley on to preview the upcoming draft. And since then, we've had draft, we've had rookie minicamp, we've had a couple other moves, a bunch of headlines. And now we're into OTAs. So off season is full swing. We're almost halfway through. A lot to get into. We want to give some recaps of the off season, give out some grades, and talk about some of those headlines and what else we're still looking to get answers on. But Chris, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Keegan, man. It's good to be talking some Chiefs. Again, it's just been the off season mode, and they got a shot with the Royals playing like they are. The Chiefs have, I won't say back burner, but they haven't been as pressing or as as much as we've needed in the past. So that's kind of a good thing.
Yeah, there's just not, I mean, some others would say there's a lot of football still going on right now, but I think for the average casual everyday fan, not enough that we need to dive in super deep. Guys are going to practice. Some guys are not going to practice. It's voluntary, but there's been plenty of headlines we want to get into. But before we talk some of that, just give me your take so far on the offseason as a whole. If you had to give it a letter grade, what would you give it up to this point?
With the football moves, I think you have to give it an A minus. I think they've attacked. I think the draft went well. I think they've attacked a lot of things properly. Getting Chris Jones, extending Travis Kelce, all the things that they've done. I think that would give it an A minus. Unfortunately, that's not the only thing that's happened this offseason. They made a lot of headlines for the off-the-field issues, and I think just because of how noisy that's been with Rice, with some of the other things, I'd probably give it a B minus, maybe even as low as a C plus, just because you never want that much noise during your offseason for non-football stuff.
Yeah, especially on a team that's known for having one of the best cultures in the NFL, one of the most disciplined teams out there. They got some young guys making some mistakes. That just is what it is. We don't really need to dive in too much with Rashee Rice. There's still, I guess, the latest stuff with him is kind of been swept under the rug and isn't really a problem anymore. But they still are waiting the NFL's investigation to figure out what type of suspension or punishment he will get. And who knows, that could take up until the season. But it is pending. It is coming at some point. The Chiefs will have to deal with that. But yeah, I think I agree with you. B minus, B plus, if you take into consideration all the off the field stuff. They got a Travis Kelce extension done. They reworked some contracts with some other guys on the team to free up some cap space. Made a couple splashes in free agency that we've already talked about. And now they've got OTAs going on. A lot of those rookie guys that are in there that we're going to talk about here in a second. Some of the draft picks, some of the undrafted guys that were on the team last year that might be fighting for a spot this season, have a lot to showcase in OTAs. But yeah, I'd say a solid B. If you look just football, I think I'd give it an A for sure. I think the amount of guys they were able to retain, especially on the defensive line, is huge. Chris Jones, obviously, we talked about that weeks and weeks ago. Outside of really L'Jarius Sneed getting shipped out, you really haven't lost much there. Still have maybe a backup safety, veteran safety to look at. Maybe still another off or defensive lineman that you might bring in. But all in all, I think it's been a pretty good offseason up to this point. Can't really complain about much. I think all eyes are now just on what do these rookies look like? What kind of impact can they have early? What effect does the Rashee Rice situation have on the rest of the team? And are there any other moves the Chiefs might still make? Let's talk about this draft class for just a second. Get this little slide pulled up here. So pretty good draft, not necessarily super big names that we were all really thinking about, but those first three guys there, Xavier Worthy in the first round, big time playmaker receiver that we talked about a couple weeks ago as a possibility. They get him in the first round. Thanking the Buffalo Bills once again for adding a major weapon to the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know why they continue to make draft day trades, but hats off to you guys for helping us out. That's going to help us on our way to a three-peat. They get the big guy, Kingsley Suamatea, in the second round, offensive tackle. A lot of excitement there with him. We've talked a little bit about him on another podcast that we were on, but he's going to be thrown in the mix there at the tackle position to compete for that left tackle spot. Jared Wiley, tight end out of TCU. I think he's going to be a very underrated pick, very underrated player in this tight end group, especially with how many tight ends we like to throw out there. Could be the heir apparent down the road. And then a couple defensive players, Jaden Hicks, good safety out of Washington State. I think he's actually going to be a dang near perfect fit with Spag's system. Hunter Norzad, center out of Penn State. Again, more interior line depth. Can't go wrong there. Kamal Hayden, another one that maybe gets a lot of look early, just with his versatility as a corner, can play a little bit of nickel, a little bit of safety up on the edge. And then, of course, finishing things out with another interior offensive lineman, CJ Hansen at a Holy Cross. But what were your thoughts on this draft class as a whole?
I think they hit everything they needed to. They brought in a couple weapons, they brought in some defensive back depth, and they brought in some O-line depth. And those were really the only things we were really looking at, especially after they brought back so many guys on the defensive line that I wouldn't have been mad with maybe an earlier pick on the D-line, but it wasn't as big of a necessity that I like where they hit and where they hit it. So, again, like I said, the on the field or the building on the field stuff has been great for the Chiefs because I thought this draft class hit everything they needed to.
Yeah. Outside of the obvious with Xavier Worthy, who's more than likely going to be a big part of the offense, especially whenever Rashee Rice is out, could also play a huge factor in the punt return game. Who's that next guy in this group that you think might have the biggest impact first year?
I think it has to be Wiley just because of how much we've been talking about weapons or lack thereof last year and how inconsistent it was at times. And I love Noah Gray. He's one of my guys, but there was something about Jody Fortson having that in that 13 personnel or that 3 tight end set, the ability to stretch the field that the Chiefs completely abandoned last year. They hardly did it at all with Blake Bell because he's just not a vertical threat or a pass catching threat. I think Wiley opens that part of the playbook back up and you get Kelsey Gray and Wiley in there. And I really think there's going to be some packages and there's going to be opportunities. Now, is he more than 250 yards? Probably not, but I think just his ability as a pass catcher is really going to open some other things on the offense.
Yeah, and I think this is a massive upgrade to what we've had with Blake Bell. Not to say anything bad about Blake Bell, but we know Wiley's going to be much more. We can
talk bad about Blake Bell.
He's going to be a better receiving threat in that room, and I think he could probably slide in and do a lot of stuff Blake Bell was doing for us. You just have a much higher ceiling. And of course, they still brought over Irv Smith in the offseason too to throw in that tight end group. But there's a good look at your rookies there coming off of rookie mini camp. Talk to me about Kingsley for a second here. Do you think early on fans should have high expectation that he starts right away at left tackle? Should it be a strong competition with him, Wanye Morris, and maybe another veteran that they go and find later in the offseason? But what's your thoughts on Kingsley?
Oh, yeah, he's definitely someone to keep an eye on. I think you're keeping an eye on him the same as you are as Morris. I don't think there's one or more that you should be leaning towards because we really just don't know. I mean, we've saw, 4 games of Morris and maybe a little bit more to where he had his ups and his downs. But he's a third-round draft pick that's been in this system and has NFL starts. Well, now Kingsley is a second-round draft pick who hasn't played. So, I think they're both on a pretty even playing field. I think it's going to be interesting to see that if one or stands out or if none of them stand out, do they go get a veteran like Donovan Smith? So, yes, I don't know which one I personally like more. I think I'm leaning Morris just because of that year of experience, but it's definitely worth watching because that's really the only hole, if you want to talk about position battles or anything on this team, is who's going to take that left tackle spot.
Yeah, and Kingsley, I mean, he's a 6'5", 325-pound offensive tackle. This has Andy Reid written all over it. I'm sure as they were going through the draft boards, this was a guy Andy Reid was throwing at Brett Veach over and over and over. I love it. Let's go get him. Wasn't really if I'm not mistaken, I don't think he was top 5 tackle as far as most draft boards were concerned, but the Chiefs had him rated as their, I think, top 3 tackle in the class as far as upside and total potential. So who knows what we get with him. I think he, at that size and that kind of big body, I think he's going to be great. We'll be paying attention to him a lot this offseason to see how he does with that competition, because I think that's really I mean, I know we're going to get into it here with other questions we still have this offseason, but I think one of the biggest questions still is that offensive line as far as who gets the start at left tackle, who's the guy most deserving of it now, who's the guy that's going to go out and earn it, and who can gel with the other four guys the best. But yeah, draft class, pretty solid. Undrafted free agents, I don't want to dive in too much into all this because there's been plenty of other guys out there that are more detailed than us that get paid to analyze all of these. But two guys I want to just mention, two running backs, Carson Steele out of UCLA and Amani Bailey out of TCU. Both guys could have some strong competition, not just with each other, but to compete for that third running back spot, as the Chiefs currently do not really have a third running back signed. Don't really want to dive in too much with the tape with them, but I think two guys that you're going to see quite a bit of over the summer, not just through minicamp, but guys that are going to get a lot of run in preseason, because you know what you have with Pacheco already. You know what you're getting with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But you want to see who's that third guy that can come in and either be a change of pace back, third down threat, someone that can come in and learn the pass pro early, or a guy that's just got a nice burst of talent that you want to see on the field. So I think those two guys will get some good look, and they've got a bunch of depth with safeties and corners that they picked up too. But yeah, pretty solid draft class. Again, I think Kamal Hayden's going to be a guy that could potentially make the 53-man roster to start the season and actually play some important snaps down the road, because there's still some questions within the safeties. You know, Brian Cook, we saw a picture today of him at OTAs. Great to see him back on the field. You know, how's he going to look coming off of a major injury? Did the Chiefs still go out and sign a veteran safety to throw in that group, or they want to rely on all the youth that they have? Other guys, though, from last year, Nazeeh Johnson also back from injury, and the Chiefs have been very, very high on him. So some questions there, but solid offseason, solid class so far. I think there's a lot to look forward to with that group. Let's talk about some of the headlines, though. Travis Kelce extension. Boy, what an offseason he's having, from reworking his deal to get a little bit of a pay bump to traveling the world with his mega star girlfriend. We're not going to turn this into a Taylor Swift episode, but boy, he's had quite the offseason of fun. Hope that does not mean that he's got any signs of slowing down just yet, because he's still under contract for a few more years, and would love to see that production still there. But he's been making headlines everywhere, showing up on different shows, and just been the talk of the town. But Rashee Rice, of course, is the main guy that's gotten the most talk. Again, we already touched on it a few minutes ago, but the punch, the altercation with the photographer, whatever happened there, you know, whether it was a little hush money that got it off the record, or a guy that was just trying to take advantage of a situation when a guy's already under the limelight. Nothing happening there, but there's still the speed crash case going on. NFL is going to take its sweet time, in my opinion. Have you seen anything or any thoughts on what that suspension might look like, or what kind of impact you think that'll have as far as how the Chiefs go about business the next few months? He's obviously he can still practice, and he's been showing up.
Right. I think the NFL has shown that they are very slow, and they really want the legal system to take care of it first before they come out with the suspension. So I think it's going to be a slow burn. I think there's a really good chance that it's not until the middle of the season when the suspension does come out. I mean, it could even be next year. It could be a 2025 issue, because we've seen that with Alvin Kamara, and Frank Clark's 2-game suspension was put off a year. So we've seen other examples to where the suspension comes much later than expected. But because he pleaded guilty, because they know he did, they have him at the scene, all of that, I think it is something that will probably get resolved this season if I was betting. And it sounds like to me that it's going to be hefty. I think they're going to come down on him a little bit, kind of make an example. Especially, hey, I know the charges were dropped. I know that, again, I know Rashee Rice doesn't deserve our benefit of the doubt. The fact that there's no video in the club of this happening makes me skeptical. But again, he doesn't deserve our benefit of the doubt. So that's still a storyline, regardless if there's charges or not. I think you just combine those. I think it's going to be 8 games. I think they're going to try to, appeal it, maybe get it down to 6. And if you ask me right now, I think that would be my bet. 6. He's going to miss 6 games this year.
I am fully prepared that when the NFL finally makes a decision, that it's going to come about the last half of the season during their toughest stretch of the schedule, because the NFL, that's just how they work. If you listen to Adam Schefter's podcast earlier this week, they had the guy on that puts together the schedule for the NFL, and they talked about, the intensity of the Chiefs schedule. And He didn't really sugarcoat it. He basically said, yeah, we gave the Chiefs the hardest schedule, and that's just that. So I'm fully prepared that the NFL will do that because I think Roger Goodell loves to do things like that. He's been notorious for putting these suspensions that are untimely for the rest of the team. I hope it's not something, though, that they hold over too long, because I do think from a franchise perspective that it's not really fair to a team to go in with uncertainty. Like, make a decision, or at least give the team an idea of, hey, we don't think we're going to have a decision even close to made until the legal stuff plays out. So you're at least safe for between now and then, or something like that. Because I think it's kind of unfair to just spring it on like they did with the Frank Clark one a couple years ago. But speaking of that wide receiver room, if Rashee Rice does have to miss significant time, or let's say it's early in the season to start, what's your confidence level in the rest of that group right now with how it currently sits?
I don't think my confidence lies in the wide receiver group. My confidence lies in Mahomes and Andy and Travis Kelce being able to hold it together. Like, again, I like the moves. I like Hollywood for the price he is. I think Worthy's going to have a decent rookie year. We know what Watson is. So, like, I don't mind the room. But without Rice, that's a huge hit. So I don't necessarily trust any of those guys to step up. I trust this championship coaching staff and this Super Bowl winning quarterback to figure it out, duct tape together during that time, and to be okay.
Yeah, we've seen him put out scrap wide receivers in the NFL standards and still go out and perform and win. So clearly, whoever lines up at receiver is enough for the Chiefs to do something. Now, it might not be pretty like it was this last year. Might be a couple Kadarius Toney drops, depending on how much of the field he sees. It might be a Sky Moore running the wrong route. But I can tell you one thing: we won't have to watch MVS run down the field, run the wrong route, and drop the long balls, because instead he's going to help Josh Allen win a Super Bowl and MVP this year, according to him. I don't know how that's
Isn't
going
that
to work
how it
out
always works? Didn't Sammy say the same thing about Aaron Rodgers when he got dumped off to Green Bay? And it's like,
yep, that Aaron Rodgers was the best quarterback he's ever played with.
yeah,
Tyreek Hill, Tua is the most accurate quarterback I've ever had throw to me. All these guys, they say stuff for the clicks because they want to be relevant. Now, I think MVS's case, I would say at this point of his career, he's still a couple notches lower than what Sammy Watkins was when he went to Green Bay. But he's trying to stay relevant. He's got to get people back on his good side nationally to be relevant. I thought it was funny when they signed him. It was, man, the Bills get this super speedy weapon in MVS who's going to have a monster year with them. He's going to fit great. It's like, well, did you see the last outside of the playoffs? Again, give him credit for the performance he's had in the playoffs the last 2 years. He didn't do anything. He was the equivalent to a wide receiver 6 on some other teams as far as statistics go. So, yeah, good luck there. But enough about that. Our wide receiver group, you still got, again, Kadarius Toney in the mix, Sky Moore in the mix, Justin Ross, Justin Watson, Xavier Worthy, and, of course, Hollywood Brown. I am hopeful that Xavier Worthy will break the cycle of sorts. I know Rashee Rice had a good second half of the year last year, but I'm hoping with Xavier Worthy's skill set and talent that this might be the first true rookie wide receiver we see get heavy usage early, or at least be a part of the offense. Like Rashee Rice, he had to kind of work into it, but I think also some of that was the other guys ahead of him played so poorly that you didn't really have much of a choice. But I'm curious to see how they use Xavier Worthy, because he is a superstar talent capability. He's got the Tyreek Hill mold to him of sorts. Good route runner, insanely speedy, quick, great punt returner. So I am curious to see what kind of an impact he can have early, and if he can gel with Mahomes and the rest of this offense and be part of that core of the 3 wide receivers that we see on the field the most. But I kind of think Marquise Brown's probably going to be the leader of that group, not just because he's a veteran, but I think just, again, with the dynamic of this offense, I think he's going to get a lot more look. But those 2 on the field could be some trouble for the rest of the NFL.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Again, like everything, it comes down to when this Rice suspension happens. Like, because I hope it's not week 1. Some people just want it to happen to get out of the way. And it's like, I'm not really 100% on board with having 2 new guys, a rookie and a new guy to the system, and Brown being the top 2 receivers. And then you have to rely on Justin Watson and Noah Gray for as great as they are in their roles. I do not want those guys to be the 3rd or 4th options or 5th options when you include Kelce going into Baltimore and Cincy. So that's that's kind of what's intriguing to me on whether Worthy is going to. I think Rice had a great rookie year last year. Like, I know you said, getting more reps
he
early.
broke that,
Yeah, I don't
pattern, but
I don't think Worthy gets to the 900 yards Rice did. I really don't. Even with the suspension looming, just because they have a player that has a very similar skill set in Hollywood Brown on the field already. So that was the one thing that Rice brought, was that he brought such a need. You were getting nothing from anybody else. You had to have Rice. I don't think Kelsey's going to be slowed down by injuries to start the year. I think Hollywood will be good in his role. I think there's going to be enough to where Worthy's still probably going to start slow, but if they have to throw him into the fire and you just have two guys to do the same thing, that scares me a little bit, especially considering you open the season with Lamar and Joe Burrow.
Yeah. So outside of that receiving core, let's kind of go into our next little phase here. What other questions do you still have about the offseason as a whole, or things that you would like to see get answered over the next couple months before we get to preseason?
I think for me, it's who's getting the contract, honestly, because I think they're going to want to try to sign at least one guy, whether that's Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, or Nick Bolton. I think those are your main three that we're looking at. I know there's a few other guys that they could either extend or rework or whatever, but I think those are your three you're really looking at, and I think that's something they want to do. I really do, and I'm leaning Creed just because linebackers, as much as I love Nick, linebackers a little more fickle, and I think as much as Trey Smith gets credit for that mentality, like he's one of the first guys that they bring up when talking about the offensive line, whether it's Mahomes, whether it's Andy. I think Creed just has a little bit more of that fit, if you will, or I don't even know how to explain it, but I just think I think he's higher up on the Chiefs list, so I'm interested to see if they go there. I wouldn't be mad if they did Trey Smith at all. I almost honestly would probably prefer it, but I think in my mind, I think we see them try to get a deal done with Creed.
Yeah, and it feels like Creed's probably the more likely to, just because, I mean, which offensive lineman is your mega star quarterback spending the most time with? The center. They got to get. I know there's been some snapping issues this last year. I personally am not concerned about that. For all we know, he could have had a finger injury that was causing who knows. So I think they'll get that figured out. They'll get that squared away. Not saying that Trey Smith is going to be easily replaceable by any means, because that was a super steal of the draft. But you can see with some of the guys they brought in, the physicality of that offensive line room. And I think Andy Heck's an incredibly underrated coach as well. They've probably got some more options they could come up with. I think it's harder to find a really high quality starting center than it is an interior offensive lineman. Just the way these guys are coming out of the draft now with their multi-use skill sets, they can move around the line. Not all of them can play the center position. And center position, to me, is the one I think you probably pay for. I think the question, though, is, what is he going to be worth in comparison to other centers around the league, versus what Trey Smith could demand on the open market. But yeah, I think Nick Bolton, just like you said, is probably the least likely of the three. Fantastic linebacker. I think if he has the longevity that he could contend with a guy like Derek Johnson for one of the better middle linebackers in Chiefs history, if he's on the team long enough to do so. But we also saw this last year that when he was out and he's starting to pile up some of these wrist injuries, that the Chiefs defense really didn't miss a beat, even when they were all the way down to Jack Cochran out there. That Mike linebacker.
That's a little noticeable. That's
a little bit. But the green dot out there at the linebacker role, for the most part. Once you get to your third or fourth guy there, it's going to drop off. But that being considered, even at their third, fourth option there, I think they performed what you would expect. So I think he's probably the least likely candidate, just because of the versatility of the linebacker group they have currently. But he's still got a special skill set when he's out there, and he's quick to the ball, gets downhill real fast. One of the best tacklers on the team. I think I would give you that. Question I have, I know we've talked about it before off air, is the offensive line, just the sense of that left tackle position. I don't really care who honestly goes out there at left tackle, which is why I think this is going to be a quick conversation. To me, it doesn't really matter. You've said it before too, with the way Mahomes and his ability in the pocket to move around and break the pocket when necessary and rolling out to his right. That right tackle position might be a little bit more important than the left tackle. And Jawan Taylor, up and down year. I think the focus really more is, can he solidify himself worthy of that big contract he got at the right tackle position? So maybe that's the real question on the offensive line is, can Jawan Taylor up his play even more this next year to take away some of that pressure on the left side of the field? But any takes you have on that left tackle spot other than what you already mentioned?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, if you have 4 bad offensive linemen, clearly that's an issue. If you have one that's going through it, but 4 good ones like the Chiefs do, I think they will be okay. I think they have the quarterback mobile to do it. I know it's scary because, one hit to Mahomes, and this team looks a lot different with old Carson Wentz running out there.
Carson
But
Wentz, man,
at the
he's
same time,
experienced.
like that's true. Even if you have 5 elite offensive linemen, they're not going to be perfect. So that's just football. I'm not too stressed about it. I know Andy and the coaching staff will make the right decision and put whoever is best suited out there.
You don't think Super Bowl winning Carson Wentz, who didn't play in the Super Bowl, of course, but has the ring, you don't think he's going to
Dude,
lead us to the promised land if Mahomes
I
goes down?
love 2017 Carson Wentz, man. I love 2017 Carson Wentz. I haven't liked him since, but that was
It's
my
been
guy.
7 years.
Oh man.
What else? Any other questions you have about this team, whether it's position, scheme, anything else that you think we should address?
Nope. The only other thing I guess is and this is just more personal for me. I'm interested to see with Connor and Hicks out there, the rookie, and then Shamari from coming off last year. I think how they're used, whether as safeties or nickel or whatever their role is in the secondary, is what I'm really interested in, because it is such a young room. Even with again, I know McDuffie, Watson, and Williams are all coming into their 3rd year, and the first 2 years were Super Bowls. So that's as much experience you're going to get, but it's still a lot of youth. And so how Justin Reed's kind of able to corral this young group and how they're used is something I'll have my eye on during this early parts of camp.
I think it feels like, at least to this point, that the coaching staff feels pretty confident with what they have in that room, because they haven't gone out and signed that veteran safety that you were used to seeing. Now, I have seen a few reports, and this is definitely nothing on the Chiefs end. I haven't heard any Chiefs analyst reporter talk about this, but there's been national talk on, should the Chiefs go get a guy like Jamal Adams to come in as a backup safety if it's a low contract and he's going to be a rotational piece. But I think they do really feel confident with these young guys, because several of them are just so versatile. Like even Brian Cook last year came in and played multiple spots and then kind of overtook that back end safety role for quite a while. Shamari Connor, we've kind of heard him be called a Swiss Army knife on the defense. And I think Jamal Hayden, or gosh, I'm getting mixed up, Jaden Hicks has some of that versatility that we've seen. And then I think the aggressiveness of a guy like Kamal Hayden takes some pressure off of any of these other guys to step in as the QB or the corner 3, corner 4. And then, of course, like again, Nazee Johnson's going to be back. We've seen him used in the offseason, in training camp, and kind of that versatility role. But yeah, that might be the other question. Just again, that secondary group as a whole is very, very young, with the departure of L'Jarius Sneed and Mike Edwards. So maybe they still look at adding a veteran, or maybe they just feel confident with the group they have. My biggest question, I think, left on the team as a whole is, what are we going to get out of second season, or what I'm going to call first real season, of Felix Anudike-Uzomah? What do you expect to see out of him coming into year 2? Now that he should, with the injury to Charles Omenihu, he should get a lot more look early on. Are you excited? Are you confident? Do you still have a lot of questions about what he might be?
Oh yeah, I have a ton of questions. I don't know how you wouldn't. We didn't see anything from him last year. I mean, any flashes that you think you saw, it was against it was against backups in the Chargers game or whatever it was. So I still don't know what to expect. I personally wasn't a huge fan of the pick at the time from a football perspective. I love the moment and the fact that it's a local kid, that will live on forever. They won a Super Bowl, so that alone was almost worth it. But at the same time, my expectations aren't high, but I think they have the depth, bringing Dana back, another year of Karlaftis, who had a good second year, Chris Jones. So luckily for the Chiefs, I don't think he has to come out and be like a 6-7 sack guy, but my expectations are not very high.
Yeah, I think you have to hope that it doesn't become one of those Bubba Starling and the Royals moments of you take the kid that's hometown because he's there and the fan base would be pissed if you didn't. I don't know if that would have been the case as far as the fan
Right.
base
No
is
one would have cared
concerned,
if they
but
missed
yeah,
him.
the setting of local kid from around the area, played close to home. He's there available on the draft is at home in Kansas City. So that from that aspect, I totally get what you're saying. I love the defensive line though. I think Mike Dana proved that he's not just a mid draft range guy that's a rotational defensive end. I think last year he's shown that he could be not necessarily maybe an anchor on the defensive line for other teams in the NFL, but at least in this scheme, a guy that is skilled enough to do what he needs to do. And of course, a lot of that's made possible because of a guy like Chris Jones next to him. But I thought
Right.
Dana was quite impressive last year. Karlaftis showed tremendous growth in year 2 for himself. So maybe some of that rubs off on FAU. And now that he's got a full offseason again, because if I'm not mistaken, I think coming into summer training camp last year, he was coming off of a little bit of an injury early, and then of course gets through training camp and all that. We just didn't get to see enough of him, and he's been working out with Chiefs Hall of Famer Tamba Hali and working on that skill set. And Tamba, one of the better pass rushers in this franchise, so anything he can learn from him, I think, is fantastic. But I kind of think he's going to have not necessarily a breakout season, but a guy who could have maybe at the end of the year we look back and go, who are the guys that had the most improvements throughout the year? I think Felix could be one of them. His athleticism and his strength, I think, is there. It's just, I think it's a matter of can he translate that at this level. We saw he could do it pretty well at K-State, was a very effective pass rusher. But now you're going up against bigger guys. You're going up against bigger dogs on your own defensive line next to you. Can he take that next step? And it's great that you have Karlaftis on one end. And I think Karlaftis, you don't really have a lot of worry there anymore. But I mean, he kind of started out a little bit slow his rookie season as well until he started getting in the rotation a lot more. But I think that's my biggest question mark is, can you get an extra first round pick on your team this year in the sense of FAU really sliding into a much bigger role? And I think we'll know pretty quickly if he's not getting more snaps than guys like Matt Dickerson or Malik Herring, then we've got a problem on our hands. And to me, nothing against those two guys, but those two guys don't excite me whatsoever about the defensive line. They played fine this last year, nothing negative on them, but you spend a first round pick on a premier pass rusher in that class. It was a weaker draft class at that position, but we want to see what he's capable of. But yeah, I think outside of that, he's my biggest question mark moving forward. Maybe a little bit still in the wide receiver room as far as Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, Justin Ross. Do any of those three emerge as that fourth, fifth option, assuming Rashee Rice is playing? But I think those are the last questions I have. Anything else you got?
No, I just I don't even think Kadarius Toney has been at camp yet. So
yeah, he skipped today. He skipped today, by the way.
Just an outlook on where he's at. So I care, because
he should be there.
He should be there. I mean, I guess ultimately, no, I don't care, but I care in the sense of, like, I think 2 days ago, I was pretty convinced he was going to be on the roster to start the year, no questions asked. And now 2 days later, I'm sitting here and being like, dude might be gone. So
yeah, it's not a good look. Definitely not a good look. A guy that should be fighting for a roster spot in his mindset, in my opinion. But yeah, so last thing I want to do here just before we get out of here is just kind of go through the Chiefs schedule. Now that we're talking about it, the schedule's been out for a couple of weeks. You've heard plenty of other people talk about it, so we're not going to dive in too detailed. But they start off with Baltimore and Cincinnati. Assuming everyone's healthy, those are two big games to start the year. Joe Burrow and company have always gotten off to a slow start the last couple of years, so who knows what they look like there. But you get two big-time matchups to start the year right away with Baltimore and Cincinnati before you get into some of the other aspects of the season here. But what are some of your takeaways when you saw this schedule break?
My takeaway, and we've known this from an opponent standpoint, but it's just outside of the Panthers and maybe, the division teams with, say, which, again, the Broncos and Raiders not having a big outlook, but outside of the division teams and the Panthers, every team has expectations. Now, regardless how you feel about the three NFC South teams is a different thing, but they've all positioned themselves to be better this year. And so I don't think it's, I don't think this schedule has any real let up. And by the way, we play on every day of the week, not Tuesday. So, like, it's a gauntlet. It's it's gonna be a grind. I really don't know what to expect from a win-loss record, other than I know they're gonna get in the playoffs. But like, it's gonna test a lot of these guys, especially coming off of 2 years of making it to the Super Bowl. I mean, there's a lot of wear and tear on most of that roster.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing to me looking at this outside of our own division games, just about every team you play outside of the division, with maybe the Carolina Panthers, is probably competing to win their division this year.
Yeah,
Steelers,
100%.
their Steelers are probably going to take a step or two back. But you know how Mike Tomlin is as a good coach. He finds ways to win games. They probably shouldn't. So they're going to still be in the thick of it. Cleveland, hoping to get most of their roster back healthy. They're going to be primed to still fight in the AFC North. But yeah, 3 teams there in the AFC North that were all competing for the playoffs this last year. Healthy Joe Burrow back. You've got an MVP candidate there. Reigning MVP Lamar Jackson. I'm interested about that Falcons game just to see how Kirk Cousins looks in a Falcons uniform, and to have all the headlines talk about drafting a quarterback in the top 10 when you just signed a quarterback to a massive extension. I also think that 49ers game is going to be interesting. The Chiefs have won, the last 3 matchups against the 49ers. 2 of them, of course. Well, I don't know if that's true. I might be wrong there. But the last 3 big games I can think of, the Chiefs have won all 3 of those against the 49ers. And they're going to be feeling some angst for that game. I think I'm curious to see how the Chargers look with Harbaugh under the helm this year. But really, the part of the schedule I think all of us are circling the most is that stretch in November, December, where they play 3 games in 11 days, 3, something like that.
3 games in 10 days, I think.
3 games in 10 days. I posted it on our Twitter and Instagram a few weeks ago. When it came out, but the NFL claims they care a lot about player safety and that they want everything possible to help get these guys juice for their games. And then we see a schedule break like this where the Chiefs, if not anybody else in the league, the Chiefs by far have probably the worst turnaround time of any team this season. And I don't know how you can say that the NFL cares about player safety if they're going to have a team play 3 times in 10 days. That's just insane. Unheard of, unimaginable. Don't know what the NFL's thinking there. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's just everyone wants to play the Chiefs, so that's what they're doing. Is they're making sure that everyone on prime time gets the Chiefs, and that's their number one priority. The players and the schedule is second or third. Yeah,
I mean that's a wild schedule there. Chiefs are going to be battle tested late for sure going into the end of the season. But you wouldn't want it any other way. If you're the Chiefs, you want to go up against the best competition to show that you are capable of advancing in the playoffs and go back and win a 3rd straight. But I think that's where we're going to wrap it up on this one. Chris, you got anything else you want to mention about the offseason?
Nope, just kind of ready to get into some pads and see what this new look Chiefs, not really new look, but the new this team look like.
Yeah, still returning a ton of starters on both sides of the ball, primed for another big off season and a big season ahead. So we'll talk some more Chiefs stuff throughout the summer, but honestly, there's not a lot that has to be dove into unless some big news pops out. So that'll wrap things up for this one. Again, you can check us out over on Spotify, listen to us on the go, give us a 5-star rating and review there. That would be greatly appreciated so that others can find the podcast. If you're watching over here on YouTube, you can also hit that like and subscribe button below. We are on our way to 1,000 subscribers, and each day we inch a little closer, and your support means the world in us getting there. So if you haven't hit that subscribe button, go ahead and do so. Leave your comments below on how you think the offseason's gone for the Chiefs so far and any moves or questions you might still have. You can also hit us up Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at KCSA Pod. But that'll do it for this one. We will catch you guys in the next episode.